Hello and welcome to the Backfield, the Running Back Analysis Podcast. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Jason Gilbo at JGilbo11. And we're talking about running backs, of course. You write up the running backs each week, and we'll go ahead and get the easy one out of the way. Todd Gurley, starting off here, was the obvious popular play last week. 67% owned in the Millionaire Maker on DraftKings. I believe he was right around 40% owned in the Sunday Million on FanDuel. Obviously, his price was much higher there, which is why that was. Paid off in a big way, and it's hard not to be a believer in him once again this week.
Yeah, I mean, looking at his pricing, he did jump on FanDuel, which I actually like. He's at 8,100 there. Still just 6,300. Expect another big usage week out of him. I mean, San Francisco ranks 28th per Football Outsiders in rush defense. They've just been horrendous this season. So, I mean, they're just going to hand it off to him 25 times, and let's watch him do his thing.
Yeah, I mean, and finally got in the end zone. Got in the end zone twice even. So, certainly big-time upside there. Next up, we got Marshawn Lynch. Sitting here, $8,300 on FanDuel. He's got a decent price. This is a matchup where we finally saw Lynch have himself a big game last week. It kind of struggled this season so far. Hadn't really had that full workload type of game yet, but 27 for $122 and a touchdown last week. Second straight week scoring a touchdown. The only downside is he was becoming heavily involved in the pass game last year near the end. Had 8 catches the first couple games this year, but now just 2 catches over the last 3 weeks. So Marshawn Lynch, though, is a guy that you can rely on him against this Dallas defense. And you got to imagine this is a game that Seattle wins handily, and that means it's Marshawn Lynch beast mode time late.
Yeah, they should be up a ton. And, last week was very encouraging. 27 carries. That's the first time we've seen him get that this season. He's been battling the injury, but finally looked healthy. This defense isn't great. They rank in, the bottom 10 there in rush defense. So his price on DraftKings is really cheap there. He's right around all those guys, Gurley, Ingram, Forsett, that I really like. I think, if you want to build a solid lineup, you can go with those guys right there.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense there. Next up, Devonta Freeman, now the most expensive running back, and last week may have actually technically been a disappointment, but 25 carries for 116 yards, 2 catches, 14 yards is a pretty good performance for most people, but we all got kind of spoiled by, either 190 yards or 2 touchdowns or more every single week from Freeman. Ultimately kind of a letdown there, but not a bad matchup against Tampa Bay this week. It's a defense that has actually been pretty decent against the run as far as Football Outsiders goes. They have him ranked number 9, but Freeman's a guy that can get his in the passing game, the running game, and I mean, he still has probably the highest upside of any player this week.
Yeah, I mean, he's such an all-around back, and you got to Ryan really looks his way outside of Julio Jones in the passing game, so you like those dump-offs. He can find the end zone that way. I mean, looking at his upside, it's just tremendously high as always. If I'm paying up between him and Bell and Peterson, it's definitely Freeman. I'm leaning that way.
Yeah.
And Falcons, I mean, they have the highest team total this week, so 28.25 there.
Yeah, you got to like that offense up to kind of get back from last game where they only scored 10 points, but still managed a couple decent performances though. Next up, Doug Martin, a guy who has really come into his own the last couple weeks. He's got a decent price tag here as well. Coming off his 3rd straight 100-yard rushing game. Didn't find the end zone last week, but had 171 total yards. So this is a guy that gives you a really nice high floor. And you just really got to like Doug Martin, especially at his price. It's not priced around the elite guys, even though he's been performing like one.
Yeah, I mean, he's rushing for 100-plus yards here. Granted, the coaching staff can get him some red zone looks. We saw that with Freeman and Martin last week where they didn't find the end zone, although they were on the 2. I think this game's going to be high scoring on both sides, and while game script might be against Martin, he's actually been working well in the passing game and rushing for 5+ yards per carry. You can't get away from that.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said with the passing game, that was really the one thing that he didn't have in his repertoire before, yeah. But certainly starting to do that now. Chris Ivory is a guy that we're considering, assuming that he's playing. It's a good matchup for him against a team that's giving up a ton of yardage, a ton of points. So really for me, if Chris Ivory goes, he's going to be probably a lock for my cash games. Last week, obviously dealing with an injury, it was a tough matchup, but this is a guy that I'm absolutely in love with this year.
Yeah, I as well. I mean, the guy's almost matchup proof. I mean, he's just such a physical runner. They're going to feed him as long as he's healthy, but just a guy to keep an eye on for the rest of the week. Hopefully that questionable tag he has now gets removed and we see a little more encouraging news.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, it looks like questionable, but I mean, like you said, I'm holding out hope because any kind of workhorse guy like that, there aren't that many around anymore. So
Yeah.
definitely like that. Danny Woodhead is the next guy up, and this is a guy that technically a running back, but really more of a wide receiver. $6,100 on FanDuel is a decent price. Obviously, you're not chasing 11 catches from this past week, but he's a guy that gives you a nice high floor. He's had 5+ catches in 4 of his last 6 games, with 6 in one, 11 in the other. The rushing yards are just kind of an added bonus, and this is probably more of a DK play than it is a FanDuel one because of the full point PPR. But he's definitely a guy that has a really nice high floor, and this is a Baltimore defense that just can't stop anyone.
No, I mean, I actually really like this game for the passing attacks on both sides, even though you look at, Baltimore, they don't have that many weapons. But Woodhead going to be featured again. It's such a committee back there. Melvin Gordon hasn't shown anything to deserve 15 carries or take anything away from him. And like you said, this defense is just bad. Expect Woodhead to get at least 5 catches again and hopefully finds the end zone. But I definitely do like him more on DraftKings with the full point PPR.
Yeah, absolutely. And then another guy, this is more of a DraftKings play as well. He's got an okay price tag at FanDuel at $6,600, but $4,100 on DraftKings. Jonathan Stewart, guy who's been getting a ton of carries recently. That was his issue before, throughout his entire career. Really was splitting time with D'Angelo Williams there for the longest time. But he's got 44 carries in his last 2 weeks. Totaled over 200 yards in those matchups, and that was against Seattle and Philadelphia. The Indianapolis defense certainly not and anywhere near as tough as especially Seattle.
Yeah, definitely, I agree with you there. I mean, they're ranked middle of the road, but I actually find them much worse than what they really are there.
Yeah.
I mean, they're the passing game isn't great, although Newton adds his flair there every now and then. But they're going to hand the ball off to him, expect him to get plenty of attempts. Why I don't like him on FanDuel is just because of that touchdown. You got Tolbert, Newton, who are other red zone guys, taken away from him. But for 4,100, I can't really get away from him if I'm trying to pay up for a huge name.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be quite Gurley ownership from last week, but due to that price, he's going to be really highly owned, especially in cash games this week, I would imagine. So, all right, that's going to wrap things up here for us for Week 8. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Lots of other great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.